What's up, gamers? Welcome to Battle Mallet Podcast, Episode 9. The end is near-ish. This is a podcast delving into the minds of four busy gamers, their annual journey to the NOPA Open Convention, the games they love, and balancing life with those games. I'm Jared.
I'm Trace.
I'm Danny.
And I'm Jason.
And in this episode, we've got a few sections to get through. We're going to jump into the Middle Earth. So we'll talk to Danny about his recent Middle Earth strategy battle game. Gosh, that's a mouthful.
Yeah.
We'll talk about a little bit about our 40K campaign. Talk to you guys about Blackstone Fortress. We got a short cracked glass segment about the Warhammer World Grand Clash, and then we'll wrap up the show. But before we dive into the meat, what's everybody been up to lately? Trace?
I've been painting my little sweet behind off.
Woohoo!
Play with a bunch of the contrast paints. I think we talked about that before. But I've really been trying to, in earnest, finish up these Beastmen. So I have a bunch of Minotaurs on my paint table right now. They're close to being done. Not done yet. Close to being done. Finished up my Imperial Knight for mine and Jared's 40K doubles narrative list. Yes, I'm taking a knight to a narrative list. If you had been there, you would understand.
Hey, at least yours painted and has the correct weapons on it, so I'm good.
Correct.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah. I am less pressured by those as I am the Beastmen, because Jared and I just straight up will get asked to take models off the table if we don't have our models painted for that. No, the Age of Sigmar doubles. So,
yeah,
a little more pressure there, but I really enjoyed that. And that's really all I've been working on. I need to start working on our display board. I've got it primed and ready for our Nova Age of Sigmar double stuff. But yeah, that's about it for me. Just lots of beastmen, lots of goats and bulls and mean-looking doom bulls.
Nice. So it's like you're back in high school.
Yes.
Well, so for me, I finally got all of my painting stuff unpacked and actually put some paint on the Yelthari's Guardians. I have, for the time being, abandoned my previous plan. I think I did a proof of concept model about having some kind of inner glow, purple highlighted up to black, which I thought was going to look cool, but I think is going to take more time than I have, since we're 7 weeks out from Nova. And I have, I don't know. How many points is the Bloodthirster that you're going to paint, Trace?
He's 280.
Okay, so I have 720 points of Blades of Corn to paint.
Yep.
In the next 7 weeks.
Yep.
So, and a Blood Throne, Skull Throne, Altar of Thrones, Altar of Corn, Corn Throne, Skull Altar, Blood.
Don't forget the blood.
It's the Skull Altar.
Skull Altar. There it is.
But
yeah, I got that in there.
But now that contrast paints exist, this is a very easy thing for you to do.
Yeah. So I, speaking of contrast paints, that's what I use to do most of my Yelthari's Guardians, and I use the Flesh Tearers Red, and I really like the way that it turned out. It gives a nice, deep blood red, similar to the Corn Red, classic paint. So I think, it's going to come in handy as I'm painting the Skull Altar and some of the banners and things for the Blades of Corn. So looking forward to actually getting all of that painted. But yeah, I think that's all I've got done, because it's been a lot of cam bolts and little wooden dowels and lots of furniture assembling and
hobby cheating on IKEA furniture.
That's what it's been. But I think we're done.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you're all moved in and there's a chair for me to sit on now when I come over.
Yeah. Sorry, hardwood floor is not comfortable.
Oh, yes. So I actually have had some hobby progress this time. I've started to really put my nose to the grindstone on what am I going to take to Underworlds. Is it going to be Eyes of the Nine, or is it going to be Godsworn Hunt? I'm 95% certain it's still going to be Godsworn Hunt, although I've been playing Eyes a lot lately. Definitely I got some games in over the last few weeks, and Eyes are great, and I love them, but I don't think they can be as consistent as I want them to be. And I finally got around to putting a deck together for Godsworn Hunt with all the new cards. And I still really enjoy them. Like, I know I'm not going to play the most optimized deck when it comes to Godsworn Hunt, but I just have fun with them. So going to definitely take them or play more with them in the coming weeks. Got the campaign game, which we'll talk about a little bit later, in with Trace. One thing I will say, it was nice to get a narrative game for 40K in, but wow, 40K, I missed you. It's been a long time. I was really, really rusty. But at the same time, it made me appreciate some of the other games we've been playing, just in different game mechanics. And then I guess the big shocker is I painted.
What? Yeah, you did.
Look at you.
Yeah, I mean, everybody really inspired me. Up on our Twitter, our Instagram, and Facebook, you guys have been throwing up a lot of painting pictures. I did go out and invest in contrast paint, as we've talked about in the last episode. So I figured, instead of just letting those pots sit there and dry up, let's do something with them. So I took my Fire Slayers, which were kind of half painted, and that's kind of like the point where I'll take this conversation, is they were primed. They're zenithal highlighted heavily, because the way I used to paint before was I liked black primer. So there was a lot more black on these than probably most people would do with the zenithal highlight. But instead of repriming them, I'm just like, you want to know what? I'm just going to go for it and just get them on a model to see how they interact. And I will tell you that they don't like black primer. So
no, they don't.
The models look good. I mean, you can see them on all the things I just mentioned. They still look good, but the skin tones, which I think the contrast paint and skin tones, flesh tones, is kind of where its wheelhouse is going to be. They do a fantastic job of that. It's the undercoat that sucks on my models. It was just too dark in some areas, so you get this really, really contrast blend down through the model, and it just, like, a skin tone probably wouldn't do that. The reason that it kind of pulls it off is because they are Fire Slayers, so they always have that really dark, burnt feel to them at times. But other than that, like, contrast has a lot of applications, and what I think it hits a home run in is if you have a consistent undercoat like the GW way, where you're using one of their primers with paints, it really does paint a model like the traditional 3-color method. It paints it better. Now, a lot of people would argue that a new painter will, the colors will bleed over, and that's the only thing that I don't like about it, is if you make a mistake, it actually is not easy to cover it up and start again, because you have to lay down that base color, and then it's kind of hard to match it with the other areas of the model, just the way that paint works. But that model, like, I threw an orange on the beard, and I was like, wow, this looks, for base coat, this looks really, really good. It goes on super easy because it's so thin. So I really, really like them. I also did some tests with some of the other colors on I have a primed slaughter priest in gray. So, like, some of the skin tones, I am missing the Dark Oath Flesh, which is the last one that I have to find. It's, I guess, the most popular one because it's out everywhere. But Fire Slayer Flesh and Gilliman Flesh kind of look the same. It's really, Gilliman is, I would say, like 1 coat, and Fire Slayer is like 2 coats, and it's kind of the same tone. But I did some other tests with, like, blue. So, like, I'm going to call it Crimson Fist blue. I forget exactly what
Leviathan blue.
Leviathan blue is a perfect match for my Crimson Fists. The problem I have with it is like, so you put it on and you're like, it just looks like blue. There's not a lot of contrast. You let it dry overnight, you can see that there's definitely subtle transitions from light to dark, to the top to the bottom of the model. The thing of it is I think that you can achieve that type of base coat with an airbrush just as quickly. That's why I'm saying the flesh tones, the blue I used on the Fire Slavers, the real vibrant blue, those things are like money, wheelhouse. And then, the one model I did finish at this point took me, I'd say, like 2.5 hours. And that's from the model was just primed. So from start to finish, about 2.5 hours, which is fast for me. But the base coats went on in about an hour. And then I did all my little highlighting up. So I spent extra time highlighting up the beard, and I spent extra time highlighting up the weapons, which no one will notice on the weapons, but it's just what I do. And it drastically sped up that process. So I like contrast paints. I'm excited for Warcry to come out because I'm gonna paint those guys. This method, get a lot of different variations of skin tone. It's really cool, and I appreciate the team here by posting the pictures and prodding me, and I actually enjoyed myself this weekend for a few hours when the kids were asleep.
Wow, that's exciting.
So, but with that, the only other thing I'll say is balancing life and games. Went to go play games on Friday, and I get to the game store and I get the call, you have to come home, your daughter's sick. So folks out there in the interwebs, balancing life and games, it's a struggle, and I failed this week. So sorry for all of these that showed up on Friday to play Underworlds, and I had to split dodge, run home quick. Emma got sick, and actually it wasn't Friday. I'm sorry, it was Saturday. Look at that. Days are blending together so quickly, but it was Saturday, and yeah, fun times. I'm sure Danny doesn't have a story like that, does he?
Yeah, not without kids. It's just my own health that prevents me from gaming these days.
There you go.
But yeah, this week I had the week off from work because I'm a lucky duck, and so I tried to dedicate as much time as I could to painting, and I actually finished up my Men of Minas Tirith, which I'm really psyched about. I honestly think that is the first ever completely painted army I have ever done.
Oh.
In record time for you, and I do have to say they look really nice, my friend.
They look really great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I really enjoyed painting them. It was kind of, I tried to really just push myself. I'm kind of the painter that will get lost in the weeds a bit and try to perfect every little imperfection. And with these, I was just trying to just keep pushing forward and try not to overwork things and just let it run. And so I'm really pleased with it. They look sharp together, and got to see them on the battlefield this week, which was a nice treat. And yeah, that was kind of something I was really excited about, and that was my main hobby progress this week.
That's awesome, man. Yep. Cool. Well, I feel like that's a good time to transition to the next segment, which will be you talking to us about your game.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's we'll dive in, take a break, and hear about the Middle Earth strategy battle game. Gosh, say that
Nailed
7
it.
times fast.
Welcome back. In this segment, we're going to talk about Middle Earth strategy battle game, and I'm pretty excited to talk to Danny about that. He has painted his entire army, set, ready to go, and you got it on the table, didn't you, buddy?
Yeah, one outing for the Men of Gondor.
Yeah, that's your first game of this system?
Yeah, never played it before. Got my first game in on, I think it was last Monday, maybe, or Sunday, Saturday.
Sunday.
One of those days.
Yeah, they all blur together,
Yeah.
So how many?
The faster they go.
Yeah, how many points did you field? Like, was it the whole Nova Force or just a section?
So I played 600 points, which would be my singles army all by itself. So I've built one half of a doubles army, which is 500 points, and one half of a singles army that is 600. And I got to play the 600 list.
Okay. Just for like scale purposes, for people that are not familiar with the game system, like how does that compare to like a 40K? Like how many models?
It can vary, but for this particular game, it ended up I had about 35 models on the table at 600 points. So uh, you can sink a ton of points into heroes. For instance, like if you wanted to run Aragorn, he costs like 250 points or something like that. And so in a 600 point list, that's going to eat up a ton of your space. But I tried to run pretty infantry heavy, and so I had 35 miniatures on the board, which is important because, as I found out during that game, a big important part of this game is your break point, and basically your army will just start falling apart once you've lost half of your miniatures. And so the more models you have on the table, the less likely you are to necessarily hit that break point.
Oh, like old school undead in fantasy. That's kind of how they worked.
Oh yeah, how did that go?
It was a similar, like, if you lost your general, like your army would just start to crumble.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's kind of how this was. That's how the game ended for us, actually. Yeah, basically, the whole the game was really tight throughout the whole game. It was just classic kill points, so it wasn't anything crazy or fancy to write home about. But my opponent and I stayed basically within 3 to 4 models the entire game, and we both broke in the same turn. But the way the game is built, you have good factions and evil factions. So you're obvious, Gondor, Rohan, Fellowship, those are all good. Isengard, Mordor, Harad, all of that's bad. And the game has these kind of built-in rules that are in a vacuum, not particularly balanced, but in the context of the game kind of create an interesting give and take balance. And so all of the evil armies have really low courage. And so once you break them, they tend to fail courage tests. And when they fail courage tests, you just pull the miniature off of the table. And so we broke in the same turn, and in that turn, all but 2 of my opponent's miniatures disappeared off the tabletop because they failed their courage tests.
Oh, wow.
Wow. So the mission was just beat face? Like, what type of army did you go against, and what was the mission?
So the mission was, more or less beat face, but there was different things. So like if you killed a leader, it was worth more points. If you killed a banner bearer, that was worth more points. And then if you destroyed, so like the way the game is structured is similar to how 40K has detachments, where you have your fast attack choice and your troops choice. 40K is kind of built around like almost mini detachments where you have a leader and a unit of models that go with it, and those you can combine those models however you want. So if you really wanted to, you could have a leader with a guy with a bow and arrow, with a guy on a horse, with a guy with a sword, with a guy with an axe, and so it can be all over the place. And so those little war bands were each, if you destroyed one of those were each worth a point. If you destroyed a leader, it was worth 3 points, and if you destroyed a banner, that was worth 2 points. And I played against a really great mixed up army that was Mordor stuff. But since I never played the game before, my buddy Jimmy, the guy who played against, he brought a really great mixture of stuff so that I got to play against a troll, which is a monstrous creature basically that causes all sorts of mayhem. Got to play against a ring wraith, which had magic, so I got to see how the magic works in the game. And then a bunch of little gribbly orcs and some small leaders, and then a cavalry unit as well, so I could see how cavalry units interact in the game.
Cool. That's a lot of units or different types of units. That's awesome that they brought there, so you could see how everything kind of worked for the rules. So,
yeah.
What out of all that's a lot of stuff. What was your favorite part of the whole experience?
I really liked. It was a combination of 2 things. I really liked the flavor of the rules in the game. So, for instance, that thing that where evil armies have a lower courage, so they break faster. It feels very thematic, and it fits very well. but then there's like, to give you an idea of how an evil rule kind of can give them an advantage is good guys can never shoot over top of their own players. So if you have a group of bow and arrows, and then there's space between them and guys with swords, they won't fire because they wouldn't want to take the chance at hurting any of their buddies. Whereas a bad guy army can just shoot into a close combat if they wanted to. And so you get these kind of fun moments where it really kind of feels like the flavor of the army exists in a unique way, and in a way that is not perfectly balanced, but kind of creates a meta balance. And then I also just enjoyed the pacing of the game because the turns are kind of shared between the players. So instead of one player moving all their miniatures, then shooting with all their miniatures, and then charging with all their miniatures, and then doing close combat with all their miniatures, and then doing courage tests with all their miniatures, and then it going to their opponent, you kind of take turns going back and forth. And so, for instance, player A moves all their miniatures, and then player B moves all their miniatures. And instead of having a whole charge phase where you move the miniatures in the move phase determines whether you charged or not. So if you move into base-to-base contact, that's a charge. Good job. Don't have to roll extra dice. You're in. Then opponent A would get to shoot with all of their shooting units, followed by opponent B. And then the combats are paired off, and it's kind of similar to 40K in the sense of both sides do combat every turn. But it's on a model versus model basis instead of unit versus unit. So you actually pair them off and you say, all right, this guy with a sword and shield is fighting these two guys with spears. That's one little combat, even if they're all part of the same warband. Wow. It just felt nice because you never were really sitting still doing nothing for a large period of time. It felt snappy and pacey, and it kept you engaged.
It's really cool. I mean, it's a true skirmish game, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely, it's kind of odd because I kind of, going into it with 40K being the main tabletop game that I played, the idea of a game going, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 turns seems really kind of crazy because in 40K it's like 4, 5, 6. If you get to 7, that's kind of a long 40K game. But you're really sharing the turns. It's not, two halves of turns.
Did we lose him or did we lose me?
I think we lost you. Because I heard nothing from him. Maybe you lost me.
I think we lost you, Danny, because you got cut off in the middle.
Fun.
It's all right.
I heard
the
Warpscape.
Yeah, the Warpscape continues here. Well, that's really cool, and I'm glad that you got to get a game in. Do you have another one planned on the horizon?
Not yet. I'm going to be out of the country next week, and I think Jimmy's going to be out of town for a little bit. So we're going to kind of try to scramble towards the end of the month to get a bunch of games in, but there's nothing really on the schedule now. But we almost played the very next day, to be honest with you. But something came up at the last minute. I'm looking forward to it. I had a great time, and it was really fun to get the whole army on the table. And I will say a weird thing that was enjoyable was having small miniatures on the army. Like, I don't know, it maybe this is an odd thing, but it felt kind of pleasing to have these little tiny guys and then these big trolls. And when you compare that to, a lot of the way that the GW miniatures are going with these big chunky Stormcasts, these big chunky Space Marines, these big chunky Ogryns, and like these big huge models that are the size of old school dreadnoughts. Like it was just kind of cool to go back to the roots and have these little actual scale miniatures.
Very nice. And I think the question that we can close on is, for our listeners that don't know, Danny is a huge Lord of the Rings, not like as in has tattoos on his body dedicated to the universe. So does the game meet your expectations for immersing you in that realm?
For a first time, yes. That said, I was wildly overwhelmed with all sorts of rules and everything, but it definitely, all the characters have flavor. They all kind of feel, especially if you're into the movie part of Lord of the Rings, which is obviously what most of this is based off of, if you're into the movies, you'll feel in that world because the miniatures are based off the movies and the rules are based off of things that happen in the movies. And they've done this kind of cool thing where like you have negative impacts that create positive impacts. And it definitely feels like Lord of the Rings. And it feels like the way that might and fate and all that works, where you get to kind of say, hey, this character should be surviving. So I'm just going to use their fate points to roll the die or to increase their save roll. And look at that. They survived this crushing blow from a troll that would have killed a normal guy. And so you get this kind of cool hero moments and yeah, definitely it was awesome.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I look forward for you to get more games in, and I'm ready to buy in, man. I know you want to play a few more games and get through Nova, but if this is a game that strikes your fancy, I'll jump in and buy some models. So
you don't need a hard push.
No. Well, thanks for sharing, and we'll be back in a few seconds with the next segment.
Welcome back. So, guys, we finally did it. We finally started our 40K campaign. Which I am super excited about. We played last Tuesday, our first game, and it was really fun. And Jared's done a really great job of getting this thing prepped for us, and he's asked us for all of our input about what kind of lists we want to do, what kind of story we want to make, what we want our story to be revolved around, and stuff like that. So, Jared, I know that you wrote some backstory about this, and you sent it to us beforehand, and it was just awesome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and what your thoughts were?
Yeah, so, I wanted it to be immersive, and I wanted it to be fleshed out because, I wanted us to have a real driving excuse to play 40K games beyond just like, hey, let's get together and play. So I actually did a little bit of research, pulled out my Tyranid Codex because as we've talked before, I want to make sure, number one, I'm the winner, right? So as playing the Tyranid faction, I've designed a system that is going to fall to the Tyranid, or will it? We'll see. I'm willing to be flexible on that, but kind of the driving force behind the campaign is the invasion of a Tyranid fleet. So I did some research, looked up some dates, and kind of cobbled together a timeline similar to what you would see in a codex. So, gave some dates. The idea is that a splinter of the Tyranid High Fleet Kraken made its way into the Kelar system, which is where our campaign is set. The name of the campaign is Kelar's Fall. By the way, so I designed some planets, and then I gave myself an easy out by having an initial invasion come in, and it essentially wiped out all but one of the planets. So in the initial invasion, the Tyranid were held off from wiping out the last planet by the second company, the Ultramarines, and the first and third companies of the Crimson Fists. So, so the last planet was spared, and the Tyranid High Fleet kind of broke off. So it was going to cost the High Fleet too much in resources to be able to get to the planet, so they just kind of split out. So after that, the High Fleet, now dubbed High Fleet Kalari, begins winding its way towards Holy Terra. Like, it's clear, it's evident that that's the path that it's taking. And that,
Oh, no.
I know, right? But thankfully, I guess, finger quotes, thankfully, the Cicatrix Maledictum rent the galaxy in two.
You're welcome, Imperium.
That's right. Cutting off the High Fleet's path towards Holy Terra. So, after that, the High Fleet kind of looks like it's meandering, over the course of the next century or so. And then after the end of the Indomitus Crusade, it becomes apparent that the High Fleet is actually making its way back towards the Kelar system. And that's where the campaign starts. So the Tyranid have begun to make landfall because the Ultramarines have not been able to secure the system in the same way because of the Indomitus Crusade and dealing with all of the chaos threats that are now appearing galaxy-wide. Mm-hmm. And as a part of that, there is a war band of a small war band splinter, I guess, out of the Black Legion, being led by a Master of Possession.
Mm-hmm.
It's being run by Trace.
Yep. And one of the things that I really appreciate about Jared kind of helping to organize this is that he kind of reached out to all of us and talked to us about what we would find interesting. And one of the things that I've been wanting to do since the 2018 chapter approved came out was do some of the custom character stuff, because I just thought that was just neat to have a character that doesn't have any pre-written history that you get to kind of drive. And so I kind of picked one of the newer models that just came out, which is the Master of Possession, to be kind of my main character. It's not the traditional Chaos Lord or Demon Prince or whatever to be my main character, and his name is Nazunath the Twisted. And I thought that was just a fitting name for him, because he's for those who haven't really explored the 2018 chapter approved character stuff, you can pick 4 traits from these different templates, I guess, that have different things that you can do, different abilities that you would normally see on like a special character or something like that. But you pick 4 of these, and so I tried to pick some that were fitting for a Master of Possession. So I gave him an extra spell and an extra way to cast that spell, and made him a little tougher because he's a 4-win character to begin with, to kind of represent him being a little bit more in tune with the demonic energies or whatever. But he is leading a group of Black Legion into the system because he is under the impression that some very powerful chaos artifacts are in the Kelar system. So that's kind of where that goes. But
Gosh, it'd be terrible if he were wrong.
it would be terrible. But you know what? It's all right. Anytime you just get to go and despoil, we're happy.
Yeah, there you go.
So, but I'm super excited about that stuff. And I think that's probably been the most intriguing thing for me, is just Jared just being like, hey, what do you find interesting? And I know that Jason has a different kind of spin on that stuff. Jason, what do you think? What did you find interesting about so far that we've done in the campaign?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to echo the story. So the story hooked me. Like, Jared's done a really, really nice job of kind of setting it. There's some spoilers like throughout, but we really don't know enough to know all those spoilers. So it has me intrigued to play and find out those things. And for me, you know, what I'm looking for is just a story. Like, I want to be part of the greater scheme of things. I don't really want to make decisions. I kind of want the Ultramarines just to boss us around like they always do, and I just want to go and fight where I'm needed. And more importantly, by having the campaign for me, Jared can design a mission where, you know, as a Space Marine, I would send X type of warriors to this type of mission or to this type of battlefield. And that's what I liked was designing a list with parameters. So, like, you know, before the game, he was like, don't bring any engines, like, you're setting up an ambush, lots of infantry. So, you know, I designed my list around that and fed into the story. So it was very refreshing to get back to narrative play.
Mm-hmm. And that was something else that I appreciated too. Before we had our game, Jared said kind of something similar to me. He was like, you want to be quiet, you want to be fast. Like, you're trying to get past something. I was like, okay. So that's what I did. I brought bikes and warp talons and a demon prince that had wings and stuff, just to try and like get to have some speed. So I thought that was a very intriguing part of what Jared's kind of done so far as our quote unquote game master for this campaign. Danny, I know you haven't played yet, but what thoughts do you have about what you've seen so far and what you've talked with Jared about?
Well, I'm excited about it. You know me, I've been trying to advocate for a while for kind of what I have kind of said a few times as true narrative 40k play and true campaigning. I think a lot of times what GW pitches as a campaign is basically just a normal match play of 40k that determines what your next match play game of 40k is. There's never a real concrete story. There's no new kind of objectives or plot twists or in-game mechanics that make it feel narrative. It just is another game of 40k.
Right.
And so that was something that I talked to Jared about, and so I'm excited to see his thoughts on and how he implements that, because I think that is something that personally my 40King desperately needs is to embrace the spectacle of 40K. I think 40K is in a really good spot right now in a lot of ways, but I think it is kind of getting lost in the competitive scene. I know it's been competitive for a long time. I'm not trying to crap on competitive play by any means. Please, if you enjoy competitive play, play the crap out of your competitive games. That's fine by me. But when you think about kind of older editions of the game where you had things like, you could buy upgrades for your veteran models, and Terminator honors was a thing that you could earn for characters, and rules like flamers and bunkers hitting everything in the bunker, and just it was a more flavorful and not necessarily as well balanced, but definitely a more storytelling game.
Right.
Personally, that's where I think 40K does its best, and so I'm excited to kind of get to that.
Yeah, and I'll say that the game, playing it, there was a very traditional feel to it. So like, I have not played 40K in a long time, but it really took me back 5-6 years ago where I would just grab units and just play them to play them. There was not a lot of list scripting. So it was really refreshing to get back to that narrative style of play. Like, these are the units that would be tasked to do this job, good, bad, and different. I mean, still, don't get me wrong, there was still stratagem used and synergies played, but it wasn't as in depth of what we've done. So I'm excited to see it go forward.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that has me the most excited was kind of, we all got together and had dinner one night and talked kind of about expectations for this, and what one of the things that we kind of came up with was the whole idea of a unit pool, where you draw up just a pool of units, like up to, I think we ultimately just thought it was like 3,000 points or whatever. So you had 3,000 points that you just get to choose from, right? But you have to build those units out beforehand. So like you want to build your armies based off of what you have and not what you're trying to do for the mission. And I just think that kind of does a good job of explaining or conveying the story of this deployed faction. Like, they can't change their resources. This is what they have. So I just think that's a kind of a cool thing that we kind of came up with. And I had a lot of fun kind of drawing up the list of stuff that I could pull from. So
great. I'm stuck with Reavers for the rest of the campaign.
Yeah, you don't have to use them every game.
Yeah, and it's not like they're that expensive.
They are over. I need a vent about them for just a second.
Oh no!
All right. Get on your vent box.
It's just like, I mean, I have 20 of them, right? So given the mission, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna bring 5 pistols with combat knife and 5 bolters, and they're so cool looking, and they kind of have some rules, but now they're eclipsed by the new Space Marines, the new Phobos armor Space Marines. It's literally, they do the same thing better and almost the same cost. The Reavers are just really, they don't have a home. Like, I misdeployed the one unit badly, so they never really got to do anything.
Yeah, I was gonna say it didn't have anything to do with the fact that you put them on the backboard edge.
But they're the same like they're the same cost as the other ones. For infiltrate, they don't have as good a gun, and then like the attacks, like, so you get 3 attacks with a combat knife, which is all good and great, but they only move 6 inches. Yeah, you have to pay 10 points, so they ignore terrain. So there are some cool things, but like, you're better off having a better bolter and getting to melee when you do, because they'll have 2 attacks instead of 3. And then really the ones with the carbines, like, holy cow, like, the gun is worse than the other gun. Yeah, just really disappointed in that unit entry. I don't know how they fit into full 40K games. Now, down in Kill Team, they shine, but I don't think I need 20 of them
Terrifying
in Kill
Kill
Team. So, just
They
a little
just-
disappointment.
Do you feel better?
I do.
Good.
I'm going to delete them from my 3,000 point list and add something useful.
I will say I've had one really fun game with Reavers where you use the grapnel launchers to spring a deep strike assault. Because since they ignore vertical range, you could deep strike into like a building where they are, more than 9 inches away from a unit, but the charge distance isn't vertical. So you charge in and you get in their face real fast, and that was pretty fun.
Yeah, but wasn't that FAQ'd? No.
No, I think it was a different thing. We talked about that before.
With fly.
They don't have fly. Fly is not the keyword.
Well,
we have to figure that out before we play.
I know, right? Maybe there is a use to them.
So Danny is firmly in the Reavers are awesome camp. Jason is firmly in
I wouldn't say
the
that,
Reavers
but-
suck camp. But that's okay.
Well,
So
Danny, you can't be like ambivalent about the Reavers.
Watch me.
right, that's why I just lumped you. That's why I lumped you in. Danny
Breaking the
4.
mold.
Every now and then.
Danny 4. But no, I really appreciate the fact that we got to play a game. And Jared, I know that you pulled that campaign from the main rule book, but there was a couple twists in there, and I actually had never read that mission before, but there was a couple twists in there. Were those part of the mission itself, or did you just kind of come up with those as kind of the GM?
Are you talking about like where I made it -1 to hit the first round, and
Yep.
and then I plopped some random objectives that never
Correct.
did anything.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think the -1 to hit, I think it does have like dawn attack in that book. It was the ambush. I basically cribbed the ambush narrative battle plan from the original rulebook, but I kind of flubbed I messed with the deployment zones a little bit, because Jason and I had played that one before, and when you can get like right up on top of somebody, it can just be gross. Like, nobody wants gene stealers who are going to get the first turn to start 12 inches away from the opponent. Like, that's just not fun.
Yeah.
So I try to be really careful about how I laid out the terrain for the battle. And then I kind of messed with the deployment zones a little bit to kind of help crib like the first turn assault from the ambushers. And then the objectives. So that I pulled something from another rule book, but I'm not going to say what it is since you guys didn't get to see what happened.
Trigger it, so
Yeah, you didn't trigger the effect, so maybe it'll prop up in another mission, or maybe you'll never know.
So, but we should set the stage for the mission itself, right? The first engagement, like Trace talked about, was he had a force of Chaos, Black Legion, and cultists and stuff that had to traveling down this road, and the Crimson Fists were called by the Ultramarines because the Ultramarines were tied up fighting Tyranids, on another section of the planet. So they call in the third company comes in, and they notice this movement of the Black Legion down a road going somewhere I don't know. So we set up an ambush, and the mission was for me to stop the Black Legion going down, to wherever they're going, like mosey on down the trail. So I set up an ambush with a lot of themey units, like a lot of incest.
Intercessors.
Okay, there you
Ooh.
It's not West Virginia 40K.
go. Oh no, we lost our listeners in West Virginia.
No.
Grim darkness of the Appalachian Mountains.
So I, Reavers and stuff like that, and basically set up along the terrain features. And Trace marched on down. There was definitely some battles. Did take down the Demon Prince.
Yep.
You tied up, my Hellblasters and a lot of my shooting stuff at the end of the road. But in the end, your cultists got off and some Warp Talons got off. So.
Yep. So it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. There for a minute though, I was like, this is not going to go well.
Yeah, that your expression and your demeanor before turn 1, before any dice were rolled, was you were not
like,
hopeful.
Not going to go well.
Listen, the Gene Stealers already ripped up Eldar once in that mission. I don't think we're going to make the same mistake twice.
Yeah, no. Yeah, it was pretty bad.
I was just like, this is a lot of bolters. This is a lot of bolters coming at me. But, through some clever use of stratagems, and thankfully I used Tide of Traders and got my cultists on the back edge and then ran them off once I got Jason good and distracted. So, but I had a lot of fun. Looking forward to the more missions in the future. And what do you guys think is going to happen in the next mission? Just broad strokes.
I feel like we're going to see a clash between the Ultramarines and the Tyranid.
Oh.
That never happens.
Yeah.
I think that would be fantastic.
I mean, the Crimson Fist got to report back that we suck, so I don't really want to talk to my warlord Danny over there.
Maybe the Tyranid will wipe them all out, and you won't have to report to anybody.
Don't disappoint me, Jason.
Well, we all know that nobody does it like Tyrannic War veterans do. So, with that, we will close out this section and move on to the next one.
And we're back. So a game that we have talked a bit about here and there, but is near and dear to our nerdy hearts, is Blackstone Fortress. And it has gotten some new announcements this week of new units and new expansions being added to the game. And we are excited, and I'm going to say that pretty definitively without even asking anybody, because I decided that we're excited. And that's that. But
great segment. Cool. Moving on.
No, so it is a fantastic dungeon crawling game that we were heavily obsessed with in the early part of the year and have kind of got distracted from. But it's great to see it get some support. And we thought it might be really fun to kind of talk to everybody about what Blackstone Fortress is, how it plays, and why we love it. So, Jason, why don't you give us a quick rundown of the mechanics of the game, and then after that, we'll get Trace in there to kind of tell us some of what the fluff of the game is.
Yeah, cool. So, the game it's a cooperative game, which is odd for a GW product, right? So you're playing against the system. Not that you have to, you can appoint someone to run the baddies of the mission. But it's a dungeon crawler, 4 heroes, or maybe heroes, descend within this Blackstone Fortress.
5 if they're really small.
Yeah, right, exactly. And some of the mechanics that I really like about it is there's an initiative track for every turn. So, as you lay out the dungeon, you shuffle these cards. So each enemy group will be numbered within the mission. There'll be a group of enemies, number 1, 2, 3. And then your heroes will have their own card. And you take all these cards and you shuffle them up and you lay them out in this initiative track. And that is how the game determines who activates first. So that right there it's really, really key, because you might be in a room with an electro priest, or not electro priest. What are those? Really, yeah, they're like electro priests, but not electro priests.
Electroshock culture, Negavol cultists.
There you go.
Cultists.
The cultists, like they're standing right next to you, or Urgel standing right next to you, and you're like, I need to go first, and then you flop the cards over, and you're going last. And then there are mechanics where you can kind of jump along that initiative track, but they can they can use resources and your dice.
They can not work.
So it's a cool twist to allow the game to run itself. Each hero has different stats, obviously, with it being a role-playing game, but you roll dice. Typically it's 4 dice and D6s, and depending on what you roll on those, allows you to do. So like if you roll a 6, you can basically do whatever you want on your card. Like you'll have special attacks and special movements, and then you'll spend that 6 to do those things and go down the line and spend all 4 of your dice to do your activations when your initiative track card comes up. So that's my favorite part. And then, and that's been done before in a couple GW games, kind of that type of mechanic. But then what's cool with Blackstone Fortress is at the end of the mission, there is some RPG building elements where you get to select gear for your guy to kind of customize them for the group or for yourself. So,
yeah, definitely. There's a really fantastic moment of tension when you lay out the initiative deck, because there, like you said, there's times where you're sitting there and you're like, I'm dead on arrival.
I'm gonna die.
This card flips over and it is not me. In any other situation, I am dead. And so it's great, especially if it's so basically you rotate around who the leader is, and that just determines who rolls certain dice and flips certain cards, and everybody takes turns. And so especially when you have somebody like Jason in charge who just sits there and talks mad junk before each card gets flipped over,
Yep.
It can definitely rankle the nerves. So Trace, why don't you explain why we're even in, what is a Blackstone Fortress and why are we in it?
So for those who don't know what a Blackstone Fortress is, there are now 7 that we know of. There used to be just 6 that were known, and they were ancient relics made thousands and thousands of years ago. And they're originally known by the Eldari as the Talismans of Vol. But basically, they're these super powerful constructs that are made of a psychically reactive material called Blackstone, hence the name. But the reason why we are looking for these, and Abaddon has used these as weapons in his crusades against the Imperium of Man. And in his latest, when the Cicatrix Maledictum opened up, that's when this new 7th one emerged. And the Imperium definitely recognizes, or just anybody really recognizes, that these are all incredibly powerful fortresses to hold in your possession or to use to your advantage. And so the reason why this game even exists is that all these different operatives from different what's the best word? Sects or factions, I guess, are trying to claim the treasures of the Blackstone Fortress, which is the whole reason why we're there, which is why in the game you have a pair of ratlings, and then you have a rogue trader, and you have a Imperial navigator, who has been my baby through the whole thing. And then you have an Eldar Ranger, a Man of Iron, which is something that predates the Horde. Like, it's a ancient relic of mankind. Basically banned technology now. And then you have a Kroot that's in there, and then you also have the Papa Priest and his Happy Burner lady that come along. But that's the reason why they're all in there. They're trying to find all these different artifacts and unlock the secrets of the Blackstone Fortress, which I just think is a really cool way to kind of throw all these different disparate forces into one team, that they kind of realize that they have to kind of work together to get through these halls of this labyrinth of deadly Blackstone. But I just think that that's what's really neat about it for me, is it's a unifying thing that you get to play what you want, and you don't have to really have a whole lot of reason other than the fact that, like, if you don't team up with these people, you're gonna die.
Well, you get to play what you want in this party, unless you want to play Eldar, and then Danny's character will kill you
and just shoot you.
Because I will do that.
Yes.
I hate Eldar, FYI. Yeah, no, that is one of the great kind of joys of that game is that you definitely get to kind of buy into the fantasies of these individual characters and tie them to your own experiences on the table. So, Jared, why don't you tell everyone a bit about the party that we played as a lot and kind of what the strengths and weaknesses of those characters are, so people can kind of get a feel for what these different characters are like in the game.
Yeah, so we had Jason was playing Thaddeus the Purifier,
Big Daddy Taddy,
affectionately known as Big Daddy Taddy, and then who's an Imperial priest, and his ward essentially is Pious Vorn, who Danny was playing, and she is a zealot who wields a flamer, rescued from her youth by
quote unquote rescued,
inspired by Mr. Big Daddy Taddy, and now serves him unwaveringly. And then we have the Imperial Navigator. Oh gosh, it's been so long since we played. Esperin Locarno.
Yep.
And then so he's a navigator, so he can throw mind bullets and do psychic things. And then we have Dayak Grek, who is the Kroot that I was using. And so we had a pretty good mix as far as durability and offense and support was concerned. I think one of my favorite things was with the Kroot, I got a free move and could drop a mine at the beginning before anything happened as soon as we open a new dungeon. And so that could either let me get into a position to be able to shoot or to be able to just drop a mine in the path of something. And so a mine, as soon as something walks over it, it takes a lot of damage. So in most cases, it's going to wipe out whatever hits it. Esperin Locarno has this amazing ability to move other models, enemy models. So if we can pull somebody out of line of sight if we don't want them to be able to attack this, or pull somebody into line of sight if we do want them to be able to attack, or we want to be able to attack them, or you could pull somebody onto a mine, for instance, which was really cool. Or into a laser beam.
Into a laser beam.
Which was really cool. And then the combo of Thaddeus and Pious Vorn was pretty good. So Thaddeus is more of a support character. He can hit really hard and can shoot a lot, but his thing was he could heal, and that came in handy a ton. There were a lot of cases where somebody would get a minor injury, which removes one of those dice that Jason was talking about earlier. So instead of getting 4 activations, you would only have 3, which gets a little painful. Or you have 2 activations, which is just excruciating. And then Pious Vorn was basically our beater for the dungeons. So with the Flamer, she could hit every model in a hex, and she could also drop 2 flame tokens. So she basically gets to attack for free anybody that walks through the flame tokens, or gets pushed into the flame tokens by a resonant psyker. Multiple times, yes. So, but between all of those, the Kroot, he was middling on defense, but probably above average on offense. And so he was able to kind of go in melee when he needed to, but for the most part, stay back and shoot. But I think between all of those, we were able to work together. We had 2 fast people and 2 slow people, so we were able to get, if we had to split up, we could move around pretty well to get to different parts in the dungeon. If there were levers that need to be activated or consoles that needed to be touched or whatever.
And you also forgot one of the key abilities that Esperin has too, which is the ability to keep some of the Destiny dice, which really saved our bacon a couple times.
Yeah, so the Destiny dice I did not cover in kind of the mechanics, but the Destiny dice, you roll them.
Is it me?
In addition to your 4 activation dice, you roll a pool of dice, but if there's any doubles, you have to eliminate them out. And one of Trace's character's abilities was to keep one of those die. So it was really cool.
Yeah, that always really helped. And so once you kind of have your team assembled, every mission is kind of procedurally generated in a certain way. You mix a deck full of different maps and situations and encounters, and it'll tell you, all right, if you're trying to get to this, you'll basically pick a dungeon. You'll say, all right, we're trying to get through this Urgul nest. And so the Urgul nest will be the last map you play, and it'll tell you need to draw 4 cards before you can enter the Urgul nest. And those 4 cards can be anything. They can be a mission that's a normal, proceed from point A to point B, get out of the chamber, collect X, Y, and Z, and you're out. They can be an ambush where your models are set up in the middle of the chamber and all of a sudden you're surrounded by bad guys. Or they can be kind of little challenges. Like, hey, you guys reach a canyon and there's a little tiny bridge and you have to choose to cross it. So take an agility test. And then
No, I don't. I refuse. I refuse.
Because
or you stack dice on one on top of each other in a timer amount, which was fun.
And nobody bumps the table or anything.
Yeah.
And so you'll have these little fun challenges, and once you proceed through, you'll go into the final chamber, in this case, the Urgul nest. You play through that entire scenario, which will often have little special rules that will make some villains more difficult to beat, and you'll have little tasks you have to perform, engaging different maglevs or turning off killer lasers or working your way through some kind of impassable wall. And then if you succeed, if you have one hero succeed, the entire mission is a success, and you go to a place called Precipice, which is like a space station. And once you get to the space station, you can then spend rewards that you've earned through each mission on upgrades. And upgrades can really change your character a lot.
Yes.
Trace, Trace, why don't you tell us about upgrades, because they had a big impact on Locarno, I feel like.
So upgrades are one thing, but one of the things that was amazing for Esbern in particular was if you have this one piece of equipment, he just started the game. Every session he would start inspired. So like he would have a better stats than he did on his other side of his card. So oddly, one of the mini games that we played initially, I think the first session we played actually, Jason and I basically had like a punch off with each other. We hit each other. We basically like drew bids to see who would go higher, and I was like, I know this card's in this deck and I get to pick it if I win, so I'm going to punch you in the face and I'm sorry. So when that happened, I went through, picked out that thing, and for the rest of the campaign I was able to be inspired. But the upgrades definitely made a huge difference, because once you start to get some of that archaeotech, as they call it, the treasures of the Blackstone Fortress, I ended up with like this ancient technology pistol that made me really good for one round of combat and within range one of each, within one hex of me. And then it really just kind of transforms what you can do with that character in addition to what your base capabilities were. Jared got the big prize of all of them. We're not going to tell it what it is because it's the end envelope for the Blackstone Fortress, but it was pretty sweet. But yeah, the upgrades definitely make a dramatic impact on your character and what you can do.
Definitely. And as Trace just kind of hinted at, the whole entire campaign strings together these mini dungeons to an epic face-off with a nasty, nasty Chaos Lord that will beat your face in real mean.
Yes, he will.
And if you succeed in that highly unlikely circumstance, a person of your party gets to open the Blackstone envelope, and that has a secret piece of archaeotech, upgrade, plot point. You don't know. You'll find out when you open it. That kind of keeps you going. That's your carrot on the stick, is that, when you have to go through these dungeons, sometimes it feels like, oh man, we got to get through 6 of these tonight. It's like, but we get to open the envelope, and the envelope is a fun mechanic where you add a little bit of mystery to your game. Since then, they've added a couple expansions. We haven't played them yet, but it looks like it is a game with a healthy future. They've announced 2 expansions. There appears to be at least one more on the horizon. The miniatures are fantastic. The gameplay is fun. It's fast. It's cooperative. If you are looking for a night to just sit down with your buddies, pretend that you are agents of the dark future of the 41st millennium, and you want to just roll dice and drink beer for $150, you're not going to have a bad time. You should definitely check it out. We endorse it wholeheartedly, and we'll be back with the next segment.
And we're back. So we're going to do a quick crack glass section. The Warhammer World Grand Clash wrapped up today at our recording. And one thing of note is that it was the first GW-sanctioned, GW-hosted 2-day Warhammer Underworlds event. And I think that we've talked about this before, but the big thing there is that it gets you down to a truly undefeated player. We've talked before about how some of the events, will cut to top 2, but there are 6 or 8 or 10 undefeated players that get cut out, that aren't able to get to the top table or even get the chance to get to the top table. So for those of us that are on the competitive bent for Underworlds, that's kind of a big deal to see GW shifting to that. And then the big winner, currently, as of before today, had not won a Grand Clash. So Mollog actually took the day. And Trace, you sent the deck out. You found it pretty interesting. So why don't you talk really quick about what was in the deck and kind of your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it was kind of an unconventional deck, but it has a bunch of different paths to win, I think. You have your natural beating element with Mollog just in general. So he doesn't need a whole lot of help to try and tool up his damage. As long as you can get him inspired, he does 4 damage. I mean, that's plenty to deal with, especially when on a 7 wound fighter. But this one was different because since the release of the Unbound Power stuff, we've seen a pretty big shift in like the way that people are building decks because of all the new faction specific cards. And one of the things that kind of I took note of was the additional version of Longstrider, which is called Burst of Speed. So when they just recently restricted Longstrider, but then they added Burst of Speed, and I would assume that it's because they knew this card was coming out. So now you have a restricted card, which if you don't know what Longstrider does, it's a score immediately card that you get when you make a second or subsequent move with the same fighter in a round. So now you have 2 versions of these, but this deck had both of those, and then it had everybody's favorite card, which is calculated risk. So you just move through a lethal hex. But then it also ran relics, which is not a traditional play for a Mollog deck.
Tomes.
Not relics. Tomes. Excuse me. Well, we've used the word relics so many times it's burning. Right? But the tomes, the Cataphrane tomes. So this deck actually ran the Acolyte of the Cataphragnes objective, and I think he ran all 7 of the tomes.
Yeah, they're all in there.
Yep.
They're all in there.
Yeah, all 7. Yep.
So he didn't have a lot of room for upgrades, but he did take the new upgrade that I think is going to be in a lot of people's deck, which is you equip another fighter, Soulbound, I think is what it's called, Soulbound.
It's Spiritbound.
Spiritbound.
Yeah.
But you equip a fighter somewhere else on the board, and they always count as supporting the fighter that you nominate, which is huge for Mollog because since he's not running with a lot of attack dice anyway, having that extra support really helps. And then he ran a reroll card, the faction-specific reroll card, and then Bag of Tricks to help him pull out his cards from his power deck. But I really found it interesting because it provided multiple ways of scoring. It didn't just rely on him killing stuff. His big score was obviously Acolyte of the Cataphragnes for 8 glory in round 3 if he had all the tomes on. But he also had Tome of Offerings in there, so if he got busy and wanted to just start smashing stuff, he had a good way to get glory there. And then there was a lot of things that didn't require him to swing to get glory. So you had the movement stuff. He had the new card from Power Unbound, which was shortcut. Yep, which allows you to move a fighter. If you move a fighter through like hidden paths or what's the other one that allows you to start on to go back to a starting hex?
Illusory fighter.
Illusory fighter. Yeah, illusory fighter he had in there. So there's a bunch of different ways to score that. I just thought it was a really interesting deck, and it wasn't conventional, which is why I think it probably did so well. You'll probably see more of it, obviously, because it just won.
We'll see more of it, and it really was. It's a really good build. I'm glad to see Illusionary Fighter come back into the fold because that's one of my favorite cards from season 1. And after it got restricted, a lot of people just didn't look at it anymore because there's a lot of other good restricted cards. But the fact that this can get going, and then he can cycle put the bag of tricks on a character that doesn't matter for him, and then make sure that he gets the cards out that he needs. And then in the last thing, if Molog's alive, he scores 8 glory. Right. A lot of people would look at this and be like, wow, 13 glory based off of objectives is truly really low. But when you have Tome of Offering and then score 8 at the end, if you have all your tomes out, is pretty impressive.
Yeah, you can, and like I said, there's just multiple pathways, which is what I liked about it.
So it was very, very interesting build. I'm not happy that Molog took one finally, but hey, what are you gonna do?
Well, at least it wasn't Thunder Buddies.
True.
Yeah. So Jason, what was the diversity pool, the warband? How did that look? Was it pretty spread out, or was it just Molog and Stormsire?
I mean, there are definitely some tendencies with Molog and Thunder Buddies or Curse Breakers. First off, I want to thank Wigglehammer. If you haven't been over to his blog, great source of information, a great resource to find out other resources for content creators for Underworlds. Doing a great job, and he puts together these wonderful spreadsheets on how many people played, what round they were defeated, all bunch of nerd data that I love. But really, I go there to find out what was the representation of factions, because I like to be a unique snowflake, and unfortunately, my hopes and dreams are dashed. But so Curse Breakers was the number one represented faction. 13. I think there was 83 or 84 players. So 13 were Curse Breakers, 11 Mologs, 13 Treeples, so Yathari's Guardians. So those were
tied with Stormsire.
Yes, tied with Stormsire.
Wow.
So those are the 3 top represented warbands. I don't think there's any real oh wow surprise there. Followed by Thunderix Profiteers, which had 10. And then from there, you have Godsworn at 7. And just a side note, 3 players playing Godsworn reached the top 16. That's why I'm sad, but happy all at the same time. So 3 players made the cut. But 7 there, 7 Thorns, 7 Gits. And Gits was surprising just because they didn't have anyone go undefeated through 2 rounds. And no one from Gits made the top 16. Yeah, it was strange. Then Fiends had 4 players. Eyes of the Nine had 2. So there's my unique snowflake, right? Skeletons, Sepulchral Guard had 2. Chosen Axes 2. Rats had 2, Danny. There you go. They're still out there.
Hey.
Iron Boys had 1. Farstriders had 1. And the only 2 factions not represented were the original OG factions of Reavers and Steelhearts.
Oh, wow.
That's surprising.
So, But yeah, I mean, out of the top 16, Molog had 5 top 16 players make it the cut. Then the next faction was Godsworn with 3. Thunderix Profiteers had 2. Yathari's Guardians had 2. And Yathari Guardians made it to the finals. And then 2 for Curse Breakers, 1 for Fiends, the only Season 1 faction to make it to the top 16. And then 1 Briar Queen.
Okay.
Wow.
So
Interesting.
the
Yeah.
diversity is there, but I mean, it's kind of skewed. We knew Mollog was going to be heavy, like you have to deal with them. I was actually surprised. Like I thought Curse Breakers would be even more than 13, but I'm glad to see they're not.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, just from my perspective, I think I would have more fun playing as Mollog than playing as the kind of semi-passive Curse Breakers deck that is probably going to be the most effective. And, I don't know, maybe other people are thinking the same thing, but.
Yeah, I mean, the Godsworn definitely had a lot of content creators playing it. So like the three guys, like they were really good players. So I do think, and then there has been talk of Godsworn does a really good job of handling Curse Breakers because of their speed and their range. So it was a diverse event, not as diverse as what I would like to see with the season 1 warbands really falling behind season 2. But in the end, there was enough diversity where you went there, you would have probably seen multiple warbands through your play experience. So
yeah, that's good. That's cool. Any standout cards? Any major takeaways?
For me, there's two things. So there's a new card out of Power Unbound is called Upper Hand, and I'll just read it real quick. It's a reaction card. Play this during a friendly fighter's attack action when the attack roll and defense roll are compared. If the rolls are tied, add 1 success to the attack roll. That card to me meant that if no one succeeded, if I whiffed my attack roll and you whiffed your defense roll, you play that and it adds 1, and which makes it a very, very powerful card. And they ruled it at the Grand Clash that is the way it is played. So be on the lookout for Upper Hand coming to a deck near you. It's basically, oh, I missed. Oh no. Defense is normally missed. We roll less dice for defense. So it is a very, very good card to swing. And even if you do, like if you roll a crit and he rolls a crit or she rolls a crit in defense, you play this and now you are the victor.
Yeah.
That's intense.
That's a good card.
Yeah, and I'm sure it'll be FAQ'd and updated with their next one, but the designers were obviously on site for the Grand Clash at Warhammer World, and the TO ruled it that 0 successes can add a success if it's tied at 0.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
The other ruling, which I'm not super happy with, but it kind of ties into that deck that won it. And it fits the FAQs, like it's all legit, but it just adds one more thing to Mollog's toolbox. So Mollog threw multiple cards, talking hidden paths and moving, like he can get 2 move tokens, and 2 move tokens don't stop you to take an activation. Well, then if you have the tome where if you take a charge token and score a glory, well, guess what? Like Mollog can do that. Like he can have 2 he can have 2 move tokens and a charge token and still activate and take a charge, because the FAQ for his inspired side says if he has a single charge, he can still activate.
Oh man.
So he can score 2 glory in theory if he has Tome of
Glories.
Tome of Glories. Yeah. So, and it was ruled that way, played that way.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's so dirty.
I guess I need to practice that with y'all, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just when you think that FAQ kind of cut Mollog off at the knee, Power Unbound comes out, and the community finds a way to get it done. So
yeah. All right.
That's what I like about the game, though.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm thinking about my deck that has the +1 dice attack on the next attack activation, and maybe dropping that for Upper Hand, because I'm not telegraphing an attack, and it still works if I fail. So. Yeah,
and it's hidden. It's the reaction is played as during though. So like how the FAQ definitely has made afters where you can block them it's a possibility, but play it during.
Right.
There's a lot more space during, so
Yeah,
it's a
that's
really
true.
good card.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a less crowded window than the after part.
Yep. And we've lost Annie.
Melting in the corner.
So on that, we'll take a break, and I think we'll wrap up. It'll be kind of an extended wrap up because we're gonna talk about kind of what we're all working on, getting ready for Nova. So we'll be right back. And we're back, and this will wrap us up. So as always, we want to say thank you for listening. We really appreciate you guys coming along this journey with us, kind of checking us out and hearing what we're up to. If you like what we're doing, please leave us a review. If you don't like what we're doing, we've said this before, leave us a review too. If there's something that you would like to hear from us or something you think we could do better, we would love to hear it, and we would probably take that to heart. Maybe. Maybe.
I mean, Trace, I got a review. Fix Skype.
Fix Skype. Oh yeah. Well, all right. I'll take that under advisement. So you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So Facebook, we're the Battle Mallet Podcast. So if you search Battle Mallet Podcast, Twitter, we're Battle Mallet 1, and Instagram, we're Battle Mallet PCast. We have a Discord server that hopefully we'll start getting on soon. We are 7 weeks away from Nova, so hopefully we'll all be on there, either talking shop about games that we're going to play or trying to get our the last minute hobby stuff done. So you can find us on there. If you enjoy what you're hearing and you want other people to be able to hear it other than via word of mouth, leaving us reviews on Facebook and iTunes is kind of the best way to get that done. So, give us those 5-star reviews, help us get our content out there. I think that's it. So, but before we wrap up, given the fact that the end is near-ish, we got 7 weeks to get ready for Nova. So, why don't we take a little bit of time to talk about, what we're planning on for the next 7 weeks. So I'll kick us off. I talked, at the beginning of the episode, I've got 700-ish points of Blades of Corn to paint. So that's number one. And in the same vein, Trace and I have played one practice game, so it'd be nice to get at least, like 4 or 5 more games in there where we can switch sides and maybe try to find some opponents that would be willing to play against, a 2-headed giant to steal a magic term where, Trace and I are building our combined force against either a single opponent or another doubles opponent. So definitely want to get that in. I feel like there's a lot of tailoring that can be done to my Underworlds list for the Yolthari's Guardians, since that's what I'm planning on taking. So trying to get as many games of that in as I can would be good. And then I think I got to figure out what I'm taking to the doubles 40K narrative. I know it's going to be Grey Knights.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of it painted. I think I would be happy taking only stuff that I have painted, but I do have a Kaldor Drago sitting unpainted that could be fun. So, yeah. I think 7 weeks, there's enough time to do all that, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're only going to play 3 more times. That's basically what it comes down to.
Yeah, probably. Yep. So, Trace, what about you? 7 weeks. What you want?
Similar goals. I mean, obviously, we've got all these things to paint for the Age of Sigmar doubles. I'm almost done with my knights for the narrative doubles. But yes, definitely need more practice games. At this point, there's 2 or 3 different things I could take to Nova for the Underworld stuff. I haven't decided on that yet. I could bring Thunder Buddies. I had a lot of fun playing them. But that's kind of up in the air right now. I'm going to kind of probably do what I did last year and just kind of make my mind up the week before. I've felt less stressful for me doing it that way, but we'll decide later. And yeah, just getting. I'm sure we can find some opponents that'll play with us for the Age of Sigmar doubles because that's getting more popular around our area anyway.
Yeah.
So that should be a relatively easy thing to do. But yeah, that's my goals, and then just try and not freak out about the painting part and just enjoy it while I'm doing it. That's my big thing. Like, don't feel stressed. Because if you just dedicate a little bit of time, it'll get done. Especially with 7 weeks left to go. So.
Yep.
What about you, Danny?
I need to paint the entirety of my 40K doubles list. I have to figure out what my doubles list is. That's step 1. Then step 2 is to paint it. And then I would love to play some more 40K games and some more Middle-earth strategy battle games, so I can kind of get more familiar with the systems and knock some of the rust off. And last night I bought a case, so that was another big thing I had to cross. I had the old school GW cases that kind of suck, and so I bought a nice Magna Rack case from Battle Foam. So
Ooh,
yeah, I'm looking forward to getting that in the mail and transporting my minis in magnetic safety.
I'm interested to see what the Danny review on that is because I've been eyeballing one of those for a while.
I'm really excited about it. I've been wanting to do the magnet storage for quite a while, so it was nice to take the leap. The 4th of July sale was awesome, so made it kind of one of those things where I couldn't afford not to buy it at this point.
Nice.
Yeah, but other than that, just kind of keep plugging away. Knocked out a lot of painting this week, so I'm hoping to keep that trend going. How about you, Jay?
I'm just sitting here thinking life is good, guys. See, y'all hate on me all year long because I spend thousands of dollars to get my minis painted. Well, guess what? I don't have to paint anything for Nova. So we ready, boys. We ready to go play some games and roll some dice and drink some drinks. Oh, yeah.
So
Nice. Yeah.
My 7 weeks will be spent like getting as many games as I can possibly get in with Godsworn and Eyes of the Nine. And then I would really, really love if you guys make time in the 7 weeks to play the next campaign, because I would like one more game of 40K before I have to go and play 4 games back to back to back.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think we can
We can oblige that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be too hard.
Cool. All right. So painting and painting and painting and sitting around doing nothing.
Yes.
Nice. It's yeah. Sounds good. Cool. Well, I think that'll wrap us up. So for the Battle Mallet podcast, we are 3 dads and a man who really, really wishes he was a man of Gondor. I'm Jared.
It's tattooed on my arm, man.
Trace.
I'm Danny, and I am a man.
Not a man of Gondor.
In my heart of hearts.
And I'm Jason Tabledo Murray. Peace. Because Danny didn't say it.
You stole it. This is the worst. The worst end to a podcast ever. I'm leaving. Disconnect.
The Battle Mallet podcast is protected under the Creative Commons license. If you have further questions as to its use, you can find more information via links on podcast.battle-mallet.com. Music by Anno Domini Beats.
I think it's got to be something like Clydius Maximus.
What?
I don't even know what that means.